Hello everybody, welcome back to the shop and welcome to another video of me working on my Dodge. I've gotten plenty of requests for more Dodge videos and I haven't really needed to do anything on the truck, but now I do. So a while ago I put in this electric lift pump to supplement the diaphragm lift pump that came stock on the motor. You see it right over there. I do like the diaphragm lift pump because it has a manual primer lever on it, so you can pump fuel through the filter when you change the filter. But that pump, even though it's a new pump, it gives me trouble sometimes. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. It doesn't provide enough flow to supplement my larger injectors and the few little tweaks I've done to the injection pump. So I added this pump, and they're just in series, and since this is just a reciprocating pump with an inlet and outlet check valve, it will flow freely through it if you put pressure to it, so you don't have to worry about the pumps fighting each other. However, the one problem is that this is a piece of shit. Absolute garbage. Don't ever buy that. Mr. Gasket, that's the worst, absolute worst $70 I ever spent. It never worked reliably. It would put out higher pressure one day than the next, and higher pressure 1 hour than the next. 6 psi 1 minute, 2 psi the next, no good. And then one day it just wouldn't turn on, and a couple miles down the road it must have released an air bubble or something. Somehow it got this shit out, and then it got air all through my system, left me stranded on the side of the road with a trailer, of course. So I had to bleed air out through everything luckily with that manual lever on the mechanical pump there, and I bled my injectors and I was on my way. But don't buy this, that's a junk pump. Now you see here I have a relay to power the pump that I installed. I will be using this relay still, but what I'm going to be doing is replacing this pump with a much better one. So here's the replacement. It's a Carter. Here's the model number, P4600HP. I don't remember the numbers on it, but it flows a lot. Like 100 gallons an hour or 80 gallons an hour or something like that. And the Mr. Gasket one is 35 gallons an hour. And I believe this is about the same pressure. You don't want to overpressurize your fuel system. Keep that in mind with these Bosch VE injection pumps. No more than 10 or 15 psi, or else you'll blow out the throttle shaft O-ring. Anyway, this is the pump. Let me tell you, just touching this thing, it is awesome. This thing has got to weigh a couple pounds. It is so heavy. This silver part, that's all motor, and the black part is the pump. Very nice. Extremely heavy. Brass terminals, the whole 9 yards. I'm very happy with it. Comes with a bracket, mounting bracket, and these 6 holes allow you to put these 3 mounting bolts in a variety of positions, which is very handy. Comes with a bunch of hardware and stuff. Comes with some fire hose fittings here. That's I think 3/8. I had to get some 5/16 ones because my fuel line is 5/16. And another awesome thing, which I thought was just really icing on the cake, they give you these little rubber bushings that go on the mounting studs that get pressed in there, so it's even vibration isolated. Super awesome. And you know what? This pump I think was $80, I want to say. So $10 or $20 more than that garbage Mr. Gasket pump, and this, just right off the bat, just touching it, awesome pump. So let's get started. The first thing I'm going to change is I'm not going to mount this pump in the position where the old pump is. I think it might have been too high in elevation and it had to suck too much. So I'm going to put this on the frame rail where the pump won't have to work as hard sucking fuel. So up top here I started out just by cutting out the Mr. Gasket pump. I cut the wires. Oh, and let me take a minute to talk about this relay. It's not necessary, but I wanted to do it. Basically this is just a slightly safer way of delivering power to the fuel pump. And the way it works, there's a power wire from the battery through a fuse to the relay, and then this blue power wire out that would go to the positive side of the pump. And then there's a negative ground wire, and then there's a, I'll call it a switching wire or a signal wire. This wire energizes the relay, so I put ignition power to this, and in my case I hooked it up to the fuel shutoff solenoid on the injection pump, because when you turn your key on and when you want the motor to run and you want fuel and everything, it turns on the solenoid on the injection pump, so it'll also send power to the relay, close the switch in the relay, and that closes the switch between this battery wire and the output wire that delivers power to the pump. And then when you shut your key off, it disconnects power to this signal wire, so it opens the relay and it disconnects power from the battery to the pump, so the pump shuts off. This is a real cheap, cheese grade eBay relay. I probably, now that I'm talking about it, I'm going to put a spare one of these in my truck because they're cheap and I've got a whole bunch of them, but it's important to have some spares just in case something like this goes wrong. And in worst case scenario, if this fails when you're on the road, you can always just cut and splice the power wire right into the pump positive wire and you'll be just fine, but you'll have to repair it later when you get home. And now we're underneath the truck looking at the new pump. This is the cross member that holds up the transmission, and we're looking towards the front of the truck right now. Here's the frame rail, and then right here is the fuel tank. So hopefully that gives you some bearings. As you see, I took the fuel line from the tank and put it in line with that same clear fuel filter. This is another thing that you should have a couple spares of in your truck. Put that into the inlet of the pump, and then the outlet of the pump, of course, just goes to the fuel line going into the mechanical lift pump on the motor. Now the only thing left to do is hook up the power wire and ground wire. I'm just going to splice in from those wires up top. I'm going to make some nice soldered wires to run down here. Okay, so we're starting to run out of daylight, but we're almost done. Everything's hooked up. I soldered in the wires and I covered it with some shrink tube. They're all ready to go. You could use butt connectors or something in a pinch if you needed to, but I really like to solder and then shrink tube. That's really the best way to go. And the best way to go is to use the shrink tube with the hot glue adhesive on the inside of it, but I don't have any. I just used regular stuff and it's just fine. Zip tie the wires up out of the way so they're not dangling, ready to get caught in something, but leave a fair amount of play because everything flexes and vibrates as you're driving down the road. Now the last thing to do in preparation for starting it is to bleed the air out of the system, because of course you've introduced air everywhere. So this is the inlet to the filter housing, and right over here is a 10mm banjo bolt. That's an air bleed. So I'm going to crack it loose and then turn my key on. The pump should run and it should force fuel through everything, and fuel should come out through there. So let's give that a try. And you can hear the pump running, and there you can see fuel coming out of that bleeder. I have it cracked open just a couple turns, so it's really not spraying out, but be careful, that will spray pretty well if you open it too far. So I'm just going to let it run for a while. I've heard the pump kind of go through some higher speed spinning and lower speed. That's probably because it's passing a couple air bubbles. So I'm just going to let it run for a little bit. It's been sounding pretty uniform, so I think it's probably passed all of the air by now. So I'll let it go for a little while longer, tighten everything up, fire up the truck and make sure everything is working properly. And right now I can come in and take a look here at my fuel pressure gauge. I'm at 6 psi, which is perfect. Once I tighten up the fitting, it'll probably go just a hair higher. And since this is a much higher flow pump, I should be able to maintain this 6 psi a lot easier. Okay, moment of truth. It seems like once the motor started, the diaphragm pump boosted the pressure just a little bit more. I'm not really sure though, but it looks like we're up to a little under 9, maybe 8.5 psi. So that's pretty good. So tomorrow I'm going to be pulling a trailer load full of logs for the sawmill for the Zagre farm. So I will report back on how this new pump handles the demand for fuel. Okay everybody, it's a couple days later. I've pulled 2 trailers now. I pulled a trailer with 3.5 oak logs on it, full length of the trailer, 17-18 feet, about 20 inches in diameter, so a fair amount of weight. And I also pulled a donation to the farm, to the Zagre farm, a nice lathe and a joiner for the woodworking building. That was only a couple thousand pounds. But the fuel pump seemed to handle it pretty well. I have noticed that when it's cold, when I first start the truck up, I'm at anywhere between 6 and 9 psi. But after the truck has run for a while, after the pump has been running for a while, the pressure drops down to about 3 psi. And I don't remember the specs right off the bat for that pump. I don't know if it's supposed to operate between 3 and 6 or 3 and 9 or what, but it stays right around 3, even putting the throttle to it up a hill, pulling the trailer, it stayed right around 3. So that's good enough for me. Even if it went down to 1 psi, I wouldn't be satisfied, but it's positive pressure. That's all you really need, in my opinion anyway. Maybe I'm wrong, but anyway, I'm happy with it. For the price, it's great. The price is just about the same as that Mr. Gasket pump, but it is way better. It's much more robust. It just looks better. It's got nice mounting, a nice mounting plate. It's just a very nice piece. So far at this point, I would recommend it. And that's about it. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed this, and as always, stay tuned for more.